And there we go. Welcome back to another episode, my lords, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this evening, this message, these details, our faces find you well and that you're enjoying whatever you're up to this fine evening. Bob, how are you doing, sir? How's your week been?
I'm good. I still can't get used to those cartoon images at the front. I don't think they got my don't think they got my picture because it was nothing like me. It's got hair, grey hair. But yeah, I'm
I,
good.
Amazing. I think the only thing that we need to tweak for mine is just a couple more tattoos. That's all. Just a couple. Just one or two. One or two. But yeah, it's been another eventful week in the world. Nice to see the planet is still spinning. Right.
Just
That's it. So it's all good. How about you tell the lovely people what we've got in store for them this evening?
yes, we've got another special guest, Marcel, who's a leadership coach and a communication advisor. Someone that I met in the late 2010s, 16 or 17, I think it was, when I flew over to Amsterdam to do something very similar to this with him being the host. So it's nice to see you, Marcel.
Good to see you, Bob, and good to meet you, Ben.
You as well, sir.
Okay.
You as well.
So we've got to start somewhere. It's a subject that you suggested, Marcel, but I've got a question for you, if that's okay to start
Sure.
with. Um, it's quite a deep one, but I think it will start us on a nice conversation, which is what we like to have here. So, can you give your view on can humility coexist with strong, decisive leadership? Because people who are described as humble are often seen as uncomfortable and weak.
Yeah, yeah, good question, Bob. Indeed, a deep one. Um, it depends a little bit on the type of leadership that you adhere to, of course. There is something like confident, humble leadership. Um, so I think it could really go together. But if that's the only thing you got, you don't have much because there's also something like situational leadership. In some situations, you need a decisive leader, but that can very much be the same person as a humble, confident leader, but just, changing gears, shifting gears. Um, and I think, humility is a very strong trait. It's like a power, a superpower, I would say. And especially if you combine it with confidence, it's basically, being humble enough to know and to understand and recognize that you don't know everything, and being confident enough to ask questions and listen and learn and grow.
Intelligence doesn't guarantee influence. If you can't communicate and do so clearly, your ideas die in translation. Productive communications teaches you how to understand behavior, how to navigate tension, and how to create real clarity in conversation. No manipulation, no scripts, just behavioral insight applied correctly. So if you want fewer misunderstandings and more control in conversation, go to omniscient-insights.com/procoms or right here.
Yeah, it's one of those
Okay.
things, isn't it? That's, I mean, I don't know that you can be a flexible leader without humility, because of all of the things that Marcel's just covered. The other side of that would be more being the boss. It's the proverbial my way or the highway, and the awkward fine tune. Well, not awkward. The what's the better word? The challenging fine tuning when it comes to humility is knowing where that sweet spot is. Because there has to be uh, 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 at least some modicum of decisiveness in order to get things done. If you lean too far into, oh, I'm so dreadfully humble and I have to bow towards everything the whole time, that's when it steps into things like the fawn response, and the proverbial doormat territory. You can be too humble for your own good in those situations. So it's kind of got to function a little bit like a metronome for me. You've got to know when to
Hmm.
swing one way enough to know when to swing back, and then have the skills to bring it back the other way, and so on, and so on, and so on.
Yeah, it's part of the leadership role, of course. You
Yeah.
are in a role when you are a leader, and certain situations ask for different styles, and sometimes you have to be decisive. Sometimes you
Yeah.
can be the humble listener, but in the end, yeah, you need decisions.
Mm.
Also
Yeah,
depends a
for
little bit on
sure.
how you design your meetings, right? There can
Mm.
be a place in a meeting to be the humble listener and to understand what people are thinking about, and then you have to converge and move towards a decision because that's your job in the end.
Mm.
Mm.
So
Yeah. I,
go on then, Bob.
yeah, I was going to say, I do think that if you are seen, and this has happened to me, where your lack of forwardness within meetings um, looks upon you as not being an equal to the others, and you're often overlooked. And I've been in meetings where would go around everyone to ask them a question before they would come to you for your views, mainly, or even just overlook you completely. But in my opinion, and now working with people, is that it's always better to stay out of it and get a view on things, and then to ask questions before you assert your opinions, because I think that will make sure that you hit home. And I think that I found that if you can do that, then people's opinion of you as an observer will change.
Yeah, and how? How will it change, Bob?
That they will see you. I mean, it's a fundamental thing about humans. What we all want deep down is we want to be part of things, don't we? We want to be seen and heard. And I
Yeah.
think if you are humble by nature or by design, then you are seen as a bit of an outlier in conversations and people don't see you. But once I think it's important, and that's probably what drives someone like me who I identify with this quite a lot. It it makes you when you do come in, you feel that you've got to make a presence.
Yeah.
And so that can work before you or against you, and it's worked against me many times where I come in and I may be too assertive or not confident, so it doesn't come out right. But when you get it right and you come in and you ask some pertinent questions, then people may look at you and think, "Wow, he's kept quiet as a dark horse." I've been called
Mm.
that many times, a dark
Mm.
horse. So that's basically what I mean by
But
that.
it touches a little bit on the conversation we had before that bombastic tune of this podcast. Man, that was really an opening tune. I was like, you know, sitting in my chair, like going like this. But we were talking about, can it also be a weakness, in meetings when you're humble and you're silent? Because, we live in an extrovert society. The people that speak the most seem to be, rewarded the most. And what resonates with me, Bob, from what you just said is, we all want to be seen, right? We
Yeah.
all want to be recognized as human beings. And now I'm thinking, the humble person sees people
Yes.
and gives people the feeling that they are seen because they listen to them. So that
Yeah.
might be, that might be the reason why people, think favorably about the humble people
Sure.
in meetings. It's just a thought that came up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, Bob, sounded like you were going then, sir.
I was just going to say you can be too deaf. You can be have over deference. You can actually. I think for me, humility is about projecting yourself and being comfortable with yourself as well as being comfortable with the other person, rather than just making the other person feel comfortable. Um, and that's it. Over to you, Ben.
Well, I mean, the thing that strikes me a lot about the notion of humility, and I always love talking about virtue, mostly because it's a topic that I find fascinating, whether it be from
Mm.
a profilable standpoint or a personal standpoint or any other kind of standpoint. And primarily it's because you say virtue, people immediately hear, religion and purity and goodness.
It's such a philosophical word,
it is.
virtue, right?
It is. And humility itself is a wonderful virtue. There's a great book on character strengths and virtues from Martin Seligman. It's massive. It's about the size of your average murder weapon. It's huge, and it's wonderfully in depth. But the main thing that I like about character aspects like this is that they are seen as neither good nor bad. They just are. The use of humility or strength or resilience or certitude or discernment or any of these other fantastic virtues, the use of them, the action that accompanies them, that's when you get the kind of moral inflections around them. Like he's too subservient, he's too deferent, or he's too loud, he's too noisy. And a lot of the times the kind of the societal perceptions around someone who is quiet is just that they've got nothing to say, purely because we're living in a time when I have a thought, it's on the internet and it lives and it's followed and 10 people like it, therefore it has worth. there is a personal value, an intellectual value, a behavioral value, a psychological value for the insight that even that momentary pause to gather information and see what that does inside of your own thoughts, feelings, and ideas, see what shakes loose as a result before you then offer it to the world. And to me, the notion of that particular kind of humility, I don't, well, at least in my experience, you can't have it without a great deal of strength, because if you're applying the flat out subservience, but trying to put it with an impression of humility, with a mask of the humble, then all you are setting yourself up to be is somebody who's taken advantage of.
Yeah, I think you're right. Humility doesn't mean weakness. It actually means that you've got a good sense of self-awareness, and also but paired with respect for the people you're speaking with.
Wonderful virtue.
Indeed. Self-awareness, that's an interesting one. So the way I see that is also, it has to do with, humility can be intellectual, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that you don't know everything, but it can also be, empathetic or emotional, just knowing that you can never be sure, you can never know what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, because you are not in someone else's shoes. And and assuming that you and looking at people and rationalizing their experience, for me that's a way, that's a way of not being humble. Because you cannot understand what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, and that's something that I learned through experience, and also through hardship, I would say. That it's, judgment is also the other side of the coin, so to speak.
Yeah.
And there's so many angles to this topic, and but this is also one. Yeah.
There is, but when we talk about behaviour, I am a great fan of Timothy Leary, The Interpersonal Circumsplex, and I've got my own version of it, which has got 4 positions that you can adopt in conversations. And I would say that someone being humble would be classified between leader and collaborator, and be a collaborative leader rather than a controlling leader. Both are effective, and sometimes you have to be able to swing between both. And sometimes you have to be able to swing down just to be an observer, because if you are with the controlling leader types, then you have to pay deference to them. And I think, in my mind, I think that the strength of being humble is that you are more able and more equipped to become that observer and to actually play to some controlling leader's ego by asking them for help and asking them to explain to you because that's what they feed off of. So I think a controlling leader is probably the best position, but knowing that you might have to swing through them all. But that's where I would put someone who's humble, someone who knows that they don't know everything and is not afraid to say they don't know everything, and to build other people's confidence up by being open with them.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. I have a question for us all, myself
Okay.
included.
Exciting.
It's completely unrelated. What are we all having for tea? No. What is the inherent value of learning to be humble?
Mm,
This is a deep one.
that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, you know, like if I would have walked past a store 20 years ago and I saw humility as a product, I probably would not have bought it. Um, but it's like, going through the motions of life and sort of, you know, also through coaching. I'm also trained as a coach. That has really helped me become, well, it's, I don't want to be bragging about my humility because that
Mm.
would be a little bit weird, of course, when you talk about humility and brag about it. But, coaching also helped a lot because
Yeah.
what you learn is that you know so little, and that there's so much to be explored also in conversation.
Mm,
One of the biggest things from coaching, and maybe that connects to the question, Ben, is that you always ask the coachee, like,
Mm.
what do you need? What's the next
Mm.
step you want to take? These kind of
mm,
things, because you should not assume that
Mm.
you should not
Mm.
assume that you know what the journey will be, because it's not your journey, it's someone
Yeah.
else's journey. um, and I think that's also something you can really use in business. For example, I work as an advisor nowadays, more than a coach even. And an advisor should also always ask, like, what do you really need right now?
Mm.
How can I really be most helpful, instead of just rushing in and adding your value and adding your 2 cents. You cannot assume that you know what the client wants.
Mm.
Um,
mm.
this is just rambling me when I listen to the question, but I hope it connects in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. Bob, what about you? Any thoughts?
Um, to me, being humble, it's not about being weak, and I don't think it is at odds with strong leadership or strong opinions. I think the risk isn't being too humble. It's being humble without it's just being humble without being too assertive, to
Mm.
actually listen to other people. And I think from my experience working, and Marcel, I know you've done it as well, that the best leaders aren't domineering or or self-effacing. They're grounded, they're confident, and they're willing to learn. And I think if you can show those skills that, and I was working with a car manufacturer this week, and I've never sold a car. I was doing sales. I've never sold a car. I've never worked in that industry. So I don't think it's wrong to make the people in that audience think that they are the experts in the room at what they do. And I'm just there as an outsider who's going to be humble in my approach to it and ask them questions so that I can give them the best value that they can get from being with me.
Here's the truth. Clarity under pressure isn't natural. It's trained. Axiom is a cognitive framework, one that is designed to improve your reasoning, to improve your memory, and then the subsequent decision making that goes along with that. Not theory focused, not just inspirational quotes, mental architecture. So if you want to think clearly and do so when it counts, go to omniscient-insights.com/axiom, or right there, because in chaos, the clear thinker wins.
And to me, that's being humble. It's being self-confident, but um, not in a position where you try to make them think that you're something you're not. You don't try to put on a mask that isn't going to fit you too well.
Mm.
I'd like to build on that because when I listen also to the question and when I listen to you, Bob, it's when you can stand in front of a room like that and just think like you guys are the experts,
Yeah,
and I'm showing up and doing the best I can in the moment to help you guys with whatever step you would like to
yeah,
take. It's liberating, right?
yeah,
It's liberating to feel like that.
yeah,
And maybe that's, if from a selfish perspective, that's maybe the biggest value of being humble is that
yeah.
it's liberating and life is less complex. Especially for awkward people, which I am to some extent, at least in some situations in my life.
I totally agree with you, but it came backfire. I had to do a presentation once in front of an amphitheatre full of quite senior academics when I worked at a university, and I did really suffer for that, and it really wasn't a pleasant experience because I knew I wasn't the most powerful person in the room, and so it's a double-edged sword. I think you have to have the confidence. I didn't have the confidence in my own ability that maybe I have now, or maybe I just don't care as much as maybe I cared then about what other people think about me. But standing up in front of that room was very daunting. And but like I think, the person who's never been through that has never done anything, and you have to do that to get to where you are. What about you, Ben?
Well, that's pretty much my sentiment right there, kind of tagged on at the end. I don't know that you can be humble if you've not first, tried and failed.
Mm,
I think that humility is taught to you through experience.
yeah,
Whether that's experience of observational skills, experience of public speaking, experience of teaching, coaching, investigate, whatever it is. The notion of humility in that area is learnt through the trials, and like that, the value, in my opinion, given that my work revolves around huge quantities of information, right? And so to look at all of it that exists or can exist, and go, I'm never going to know it all. Like in the same way that I know my mum's name, I'm never going to know it all, and find a way to be not only okay with that, but to make it work for me, to make it work for the people that I work for and for the people that I
mm,
work with. So I think to me the main value of one of the main values of humility is that it's a fuel for learning. It's a fuel for growth, because it's those moments where you step back and you go, I'm not complete. I'm not finished.
yeah.
I don't. This tapestry isn't that beautiful just yet. I don't know that I've
Look,
ever.
look at, yeah,
Go on,
look at
Marcel.
Socrates. Yeah.
That's
Is that
exactly
the way
right.
you pronounce it in English? Right, Socrates, right? Yeah.
Socrates, yeah,
uh, Socrates. Well, that's the whole point of his life, of course, written by Plato.
yeah,
What it really was like, I don't know. Again, that's something I don't know.
yeah.
But it's like it started with that notion, like all I know is that I know nothing,
Mm,
and that was the starting point of curiosity and
mm-hmm,
Mm,
learning and investigating
mm,
and probing to the extent that people thought like you're extremely annoying,
mm.
get out of my face. Uh, so but yeah, I think humility and curiosity
mm,
always go
Hand in hand,
together, I would. Yeah,
hand in
yeah.
hand,
yes.
and the only
I've got a
thing.
question for you,
Oh, go on then, Bob.
if if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think I've got my own views on this, but I'll go last. But are there certain industries or cultures which are less receptive to humility, in your opinions?
um, politicians.
Okay.
I don't know that I've ever seen someone display an authentic humility for whatever reasons, because it would be like from that position, them coming out and expecting the drive and going, you know what, folks, I'm not too sure about this, but this is the best possible angle of all the available information. And people go, well, I want this kind of honesty from my politician. Do you? Really? You know, so I think humility, or at least a version of it, should, and this is 100% my 2 pennies, 100% my opinion, should be encouraged, because there is a humanity to humility, and that's certainly lacking in large quantities. And I'm not picking on any particular politician. I'm like right the way across politics. It's lacking
I would,
in large quantities.
yeah, I
Go
would
on, Marcel.
almost go into the direction of, is a lack of humility, at the root of where we are with the world right now. If you look at politicians and the need to be really assertive and bold and these kind of things, which are like the complete opposite of humility, and like the system that's created about, by all that boldness. People expect people to be bold, and they expect their politicians to have these bold statements. And if you don't, if you have a balanced view and a learning view and a listening view, people will just walk past you and they will ignore you in this political arena. And the media, they feed off of that, right? With big headlines, and then you have the clickbait and these kind of things. Like, it's all not really humble. It's bold, and it's not nuanced.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to kind of come back to a different historical figure, from Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and the rest of the wizards, Mr. Marcus Aurelius himself. I don't even know that I have the English words to describe the kind of general that he was, the philosopher that he was. And, certainly if you read his meditations and his other works, how much of these ideas are true, and they've kind of been filtered throughout other people throughout time and whatnot. But it was this idea that he had hired or asked someone to walk behind him in the market when all of these people are going, oh Marcus, thank you, oh you're this, you're the greatest emperor, you're the greatest this, you're the greatest this, to kind of say to him, you're only a man, and as a way of keeping him grounded, keeping his 2 feet on the floor. Like we see it nowadays with this person has 1,100 million followers or whatever it is. Great.
Are you talking about Bob?
Obviously. the leader of the AI imagery cult that we're about to start, of course. But in those situations, if you are leading that, going, well, I have 1,100 million followers, therefore I am X, Y, and Z, there's no humility in that. But if you are attentive to your 1,100 million, I don't know how you would. I don't know why I plucked that random silly number out of the air, but the point still stands that if you are attentive to whoever it is that's giving you time, and showing the fair degree of reciprocity behind it, then these kind of things spiral. So yeah, politics would have been my answer, Bob.
What about yourself, Marcel?
I completely agree with Ben. I know that this is really easy, but politics for sure, and the whole system behind it, right? Which we just talked about. Yeah.
Yeah. From my perspective, I've come across it in various organisations, but one also when organisations are very closely knit together, And one of those, and also when they feel that the world is against them. So, say someone like the police service, um, it would be seen as a weakness, and certainly when I was in the police, interviewing, you had to be in charge. Whereas now, if you look at modern methods of interviewing, they're all about giving the time and space and giving the power away
Mm.
to the person that you're with, because that seems to work better. And if you do the sort of work that Ben and I do, and we do a lot of teaching people how to influence people, not persuade them, because that's
Mm.
very difficult, too
Mm.
difficult for me to do, but to use covert influence if you want. The best way to do that is to be humble,
Mm.
because you're not seen as threatening. And that is one of the positive byproducts, I think, of being humble, is that people will underestimate you until it's maybe too late. Because if you're being quiet and just saying, "Well, help me, can you do this?" And, "Oh, that's really interesting what you're saying. Tell me more." By
Mm.
the time they realise, when you come back to them with, the good questions, etc., then they realise that maybe they've misread you.
Yeah.
So I do think that what you said earlier, Marcel, is it is a superpower.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, definitely. And it's you learn it through experience.
Mm.
And from early, from the early days, like not the early days, but when you go to school, for example, as a kid, like you are basically trained to have all the answers, right?
yeah.
And that's how people grow up,
Mm,
with the notion that they need to have answers because answers give power. And then at
yes.
some point, through experience, going through the valley and then, getting the perspective of climbing on the mountain and looking back where you were, you get that humility and you start asking more questions, probably. Um, yeah, so that's also the cultural thing of having needing to have all the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
there's there's real wisdom in a beautiful question, I would
Mm.
say.
there is a big link, as far as I'm concerned, between mindfulness and humility. Because I think it's mindfulness to me, and I don't know what you think of it. It's understanding other people, and it is the foundation on what I do, and what I do in my courses with people, is to say to them, that you have to understand other people, but you can't understand other people until you know yourself, and be comfortable with yourself, because we all wear masks and we've got to make sure the mask fits, and it's always better to under go under rather than over.
Yeah, yeah. For me, mindfulness is indeed about, your self-awareness, knowing yourself, knowing your feelings, knowing your triggers, these kind of things. For me, not so much about understanding other people because, and that's the difference, of course. For you, it's like, a way of living and a profession. But from my perspective, it's impossible to know other people and to know what they think, for example, and what they feel, because the moment you start rationalizing it, you basically get lost and ego gets in the way, and you put a label on it, and well, I don't know if that's really helpful. So yeah, that's what it you know triggers in me when I hear, like, really understanding people.
Mm. Mm. I I mean, I've I lament mindfulness books. The practice, beautiful. The books
Yeah,
of the description, I have a lot of problems with, mostly because they
yeah,
boil down
yeah,
to be more mindful. Okay,
yeah,
how? So
yeah,
to that end, I was rereading recently Amy Herman's book, Visual Intelligence, a wonderful book, and it connects to TED questions with Tell, Explain, Describe.
yeah,
So maybe as a closing sentiment, we take a few minutes to describe how people might recognize humility in others and or in themselves. mostly because if you're in a situation where you're going, well, humility can be seen as weakness, humility can be seen as strength.
Mm.
Wonderful insight, but those are inferences. Those are developments in the moment for sure. So
Yeah.
how would we, following Amy Herman's position, how would we describe humility as an observation on behavior, whether it be from the self or seeing it in others?
I would say like silence, calm, um, creating space for others. Um, these kind of things. I don't know if that's visual enough, but that's what comes to mind.
Nice.
Bob, what
But
do you think?
Right. Well, I think it's about listening more than talking, but doing that without diminishing yourself in that moment, in that conversation. Um, Understanding others while still being an advocate for your own position, and pairing humility with clarity.
nice. I like that. Um, for me, it's about striking the difference um, between motion and stillness. Much
Oh,
much
brilliant.
much like you were saying, Marcel. You can be still. That doesn't by any moment mean that you are passive and not
Mm,
engaged. And it's humility sits in the balance between the two, in the
mm,
ebbs and flows of that situation. And in true nerdy sentiment, it reminds me of physics demonstrations of like particle waves and the whatnot. You might see it going like this, but if you were to look at it from above, it would just look like one still line. These different points of observation is a particularly useful way of thinking about humility. Much like you made the observation about empathy, uh, in that we don't really know what's going on in other people's lives. So if we make any kind of assessment about them, are we really being empathy, or are we empathetic?
mm.
Excuse me, or are we just speaking from our own positions about what it is that we would do if we were in that particular moment? That's less
Yeah,
about
Mm.
empathy in that situation. So is compassion more relevant? Wonderful virtue
Mm.
again. Um,
definitely. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. We
So
see the world as we are. Eh?
yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, so compassion is much more powerful, I think, in that sense.
100%.
Feeling with other people instead of, rationalizing them.
Yeah, 100%. So, gents, we have a kind of a history in our closing moments of providing like a Jerry Springer's final thoughts almost on whatever the topic at hand is, and I think we've really been able to open out humility in many different ways for those that work in the observational world, those that work in any kind of particular high stakes business practice, to a personal level, to a friendship level, to a relational level, and beyond. But if we were going to leave our dear viewers with any parting sentiment about what we want them to think, or at least have an idea in relation to it, might be too much of an egoic response to even think that I could make anyone think anything. If they were just going to hear our ideas about humility, what would they be?
Yeah, good question. Should I go first?
Please, please, by
Yeah,
all
so
means.
it's also like I also used to be a podcaster, as you know, Bob, because you were on my show. One of
Mm.
the other people who was on my show was Michael Bungay Stanier. He is a coach and the author of The Coaching Habit, like a very famous book in coaching. And he talked about the advice trap, and that's the trap to always give advice, right? And to, even if people don't ask for it, you give advice. So it's also, for example, a manager with some of his, the people he works with, when they start, explaining their story to them, instead of rushing in with your advice, slow down and listen and stay curious a little bit longer and really try to find out what their problem is. Because usually the problem is not the first problem that comes out. So one of the things he also says is like, keep asking what else, what else, what else. Of course, at some point you have to stop with that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because it will get annoying. But that's also something I want to just give, like in terms of practical advice. Be careful with advice. You asked me for advice, but be careful with advice and stay curious longer and listen and ask questions.
Bob?
Yeah, I think what I've learned from experience, being someone who has suffered with imposter syndrome and lack of self-confidence, I think that it's said that to me, being, from the position I'm in now, is being humble. I've learned that you can still have strong opinions, but you hold them loosely. And that's probably all I want to say. And, what I finished nearly all my courses on is every day you get up and you have choices and choose to be kind.
Here. I don't
Yeah.
know that I can or even want to add much else onto that. So I'll paraphrase Socrates himself. We all know very little, very little. The road with which we discover more. That's the fun way to do it.
Isn't that the beauty of life, Ben?
Yeah.
Right. There is I'm kind of digressing slightly, but the point is very much connected to that. I'm really into the TV show Shrinking at the minute. It's oh my God, it's such a wonderful use of psychological technique, but through some very lovely characters. And I mean, I won't bore you with the details, but there was this one line in the finale where Jason Segel's character is talking to Harrison Ford's character, basically like, I'm so beaten up, I'm covered in scars, metaphorically speaking, about life. And Harrison Ford goes, words to the effect of, well, what a wonderful thing that is to get to be your age and be completely covered in scars. Why would you not want that? And I was like, oh, amazing. Just an amazing interpretation of this kind of struggle that we're all on, really. So, folks, thank you for sticking with us. And if you've been one of the many people that have joined in live, thank you for doing so. Be sure in the future, if you do manage to get in live, drop a question, drop a comment. We'd love to hear from you and your take on precisely whatever it is that we're waffling on about at the time. And to allow us to keep bringing these episodes to you, if you make sure you click on the subscription bell when this goes out very soon. And on a personal note, Marcel, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I would say, it was really enlightening, and it was good to have you here, and maybe you'll consider coming back in the future. We'd love to have you back.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Top scenes, indeed. So with that in mind, folks, we'll love you and leave you, and we'll see you all very soon. All right, take care.